the tests that are discussed, it's called an RT-PCR. This is a test that I'm working at Yale University, and this is a test that we routinely use. So when I learned online early on in the epidemic the type of test that was being used, immediately I thought this is something that can and should be done in Puerto Rico, because I know people that do that type of test in Puerto Rico. So I was surprised when it was announced early on that the tests were going to be done outside of Puerto Rico and that it would take days to get results. It actually took a week, but it was announced that it would take days. And the reason that I was surprised was because in an epidemic, every minute counts. Like essentially, the longer you take to know the data, who's been positive, who's negative in terms of the test, the more it disrupts the society and the less information you have to act. So the analogy that I will make is, it will be like, you cover the hurricane. So it will be like if we were trying to predict when the hurricane is going to make landfall without having a Doppler radar. So in Puerto Rico, in the old days, I remember my grandfather, he would look at avocado trees and he will say, oh, it looks like there's going to be a very strong hurricane season this year. So it would be like if we were trying to make predictions about the hurricane based on avocado trees. And I grew up in Puerto Rico. I have many family members there. It's my country and I care about it deeply. So I am concerned, knowing what I know, that the tests are taking this long, because the tests are the foundation to all future strategies, epidemiological and otherwise.
Okay, so specifically, there are labs on the island who you equipped with the ability to perform the test and get the results in a one-day period or a couple of 2 or 3 hours.
Look,
what is the holdup for them not being allowed to do that?
Right. So to get to the test to work, you need a few ingredients. So let me just break them down for you and tell you which ones we have and which ones we do not have. And when I say we, I mean the laboratories in the island. So you will need the technical expertise. Puerto Rico has that. It has the trained scientists on the ground, which have the commitment, the knowledge to be able to carry out this test. You need to have laboratories that are certified by the federal government, by the state government, to be able to do this type of clinical test. Puerto Rico has that too. You need to have the machines, the equipment that is quite sophisticated to be able to run this test. That's also there. That's also there on the ground. And the fourth element that you need, which is ironically the simplest, are the reagents to be able to make the test. Now, the reagents vary based on what you're testing for. For example, when there was the Zika epidemic, you needed a different type of reagents than you will need now for COVID, for the coronavirus, right? When it was the chikungunya epidemic, you needed a different type of testing that you need for COVID. So the reagents that are needed are reagents that actually come from the CDC and the Department of Health. Now, it is my opinion that the CDC and the Department of Health should be increasing capacity of other private laboratories and academic laboratories so that they can actually run this test. And there are far more tests being run every day. And that's the only way that you're going to know the true degree of the epidemic and how it's growing. Otherwise, we're flying blind.
Okay, but I want to focus in on what I talked to the Secretary of Health about today. There is something called positive control, correct?
Correct.
And let me put it in layman's terms, since I'm not a scientist, in a way, and you can correct me where I go wrong. In order to verify that the private entities on the island have a proper functioning test that can adequately detect whether or not a test is positive or negative, you have to have the positive control from a successful positive test.
Correct.
And from that successful positive test, you use it on your test to make sure that you get that same match with the positive.
That's
and
exactly
right.
right.
If you do, that means that you have the right mechanics to do the test. Having said that, I asked the Secretary of Health today, you have a positive control ingredient that you could give to private entities on the island. And she said, we do not have that authority. It is up to the CDC. And I pressed her for what felt like 10 minutes and finally got her to say, I will ask the CDC if we can give that to the private labs on the island. And I said, well, I will ask the CDC too. Because if those private labs were able to get that, what I'm understanding from you is they would have the ability to do the test today. The Puerto Rican government, as of tonight, this is shocking. The Puerto Rican government, as of tonight, has done less than 30 COVID-19 tests. Less than 30. And that's leading people to say, though they have no proof, but it's understandable why people would say they don't want you to know the truth. They don't want to do more tests. They don't want the number to go higher. Now, we have no proof of that, but that's what happens when you only do 30 tests. And in all fairness, the lady who's the head of the health department said to me, we don't have the personnel and the mechanics and the equipment to do more. Did I get anything wrong? And pick up from there.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll pick up from the last part. We don't have the personnel or the equipment to do more. There is the personnel and the equipment to do more in Puerto Rico. But in order for that personnel and equipment to do more, they need to compare the results with the Department of Health. So be it the Department of Health or the CDC, what you're calling a positive control, what it essentially means is if I have a laboratory facility, and I have zero conflict of interest about this, David. I don't have any private labs in Puerto Rico. My laboratory is a research lab in the US. I only care about this because I'm a Puerto Rican that's concerned about my people. If you have a private laboratory in Puerto Rico and you have the machines and you have the technical expertise and you have the certification, still, when you run the test, you need to run essentially 10 samples. In those 10 samples, 5 of them are going to be negative, meaning those samples don't have the virus, and 5 of them are going to be positive. And you don't know which 5 those are. And you put them through your machine and you say, sample 1 is positive, sample 2 is negative, sample 3 is negative, sample 4 is positive. And if you get all the positives right and all the negatives right, that's how you know that you're running correctly. Now, in order for you to be able to do that test, you need to have the help of a place like the Department of Health, who has the positive control so that you can compare your results to their results. If they don't share that information, if they don't share those reagents, then the private laboratories in Puerto Rico their hands are tied. There are other ways in which they can do it, but it's much harder. For example, I met really entrepreneurial owners of laboratories in Puerto Rico that are, because they're not getting this type of help from the Department of Health, they're going directly to private companies with private contracts and private companies in the US to try to get this test going in Puerto Rico. And I applaud them. I think it's great. But I also think it's a tragedy that the Department of Health is not making a Department of Health and the CDC is not making a bigger, better effort to engage all these resources they have at a time of an emergency.
So somebody's asking, do we have all informational elements to make projections of positive cases?
Currently, no, because we don't have enough tests. You mentioned that there were only there were less than 30 tests. I actually heard, last time I heard 37. But look, there are no more than 40, okay? Like, it's changing every day, but they say they can do 50, but they haven't done 50. So where is that I can do 50? That sounds to me like when I tell people that I can run a marathon, but I haven't. So can I? Maybe, but I haven't done it. So can they do 50? I don't know. And if they can do 50, they should be doing 50. They should be doing 100. Why aren't they doing that? And what I have heard when I talk to scientists that are very close to what's going on, what they say is that the regulations that they're using to decide if they should run a test or not are regulations that are way too strict. What is the problem with that, David? Today, a study came out from Padua University in Italy, where a person routinely tests, this is the importance of tests, routinely tests 3,000 people and found that only 10% of the people that were positive for coronavirus were symptomatic. 10%. But 100% of the people that have coronavirus can spread it.
So guys, that's why this is so important for those of you who are watching, who don't already know, that there are asymptomatic people walking around the island and listen, for the couple of people who have asked, why do you keep talking so much about Puerto Rico? I started covering the hurricane 2.5 years ago. It's become a passion of mine because issues on the island are underreported. And quite frankly, sometimes I fear that if I didn't report it, I don't know that it would be known, at least here in the States. And there's a lot of people on the mainland. So that's why I care about it. And also you have to understand that, you know, what happens in Puerto Rico is dependent in many ways on Washington, because Puerto Rico doesn't have any voting representation in the Congress. and they're dependent on other people to help them, right? Their governor issued this state of emergency and curfew and lockdown really before any of the other governors in the state. And she has been lauded by people for the leadership that they believe she took in doing that. But having said that, there is this critical thing that's happening. The airport is still open. They closed it to cruise ships, but people are still arriving on the island. There's only 5 positive cases. I mean, Danielle, there has to be more than 5. I mean,
well,
that's not.
Look, I comment, and I did it publicly on Twitter. I commend the governor for the courageous action of the curfew. I think it was forward-looking. I think it was courageous. I think it's what needs to happen right now. It's a huge sacrifice for the Puerto Rican people. You're taking an economy that is like really in shambles after an earthquake. You're asking a lot from the people, but it's the right thing to ask at this moment. But that, without the test, is what we call in Spanish por gusto. You're just doing it for the fun of it. Because in 2 weeks, like if you have, like it's making so many assumptions, David, that are just wrong. What's going to happen? Like, what are they going to do in 2 weeks? They're going to like close down the borders. They don't control the borders. Like they cannot assume that the only cases that are coming are from Italy and China. That is an assumption that is about 3 months old. Like there was a video circulating today of a Puerto Rican doctor in New York talking about the cases in New York. Like there are cases all over the US. This is a pandemic. Puerto Rico, the way it protects itself is with information. Like with information and with science. And Puerto Rico has the scientists. It has, like, we have a phrase also in Spanish, no somos mancos. We have, we have hands, we have brains, we can protect ourselves.
Well, but Puerto Rico literally is busting at the seams with scientists like yourself, doctors, lawyers, veterinarians, PhDs, in many ways who can't find work on the island. So they leave to go elsewhere to find it. There's so many smart people in Puerto Rico, it would blow your mind. What needs to be done? Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to just complain about it. What needs to be done? Because I think the governor's trying to do the right thing. I think the officials are trying to do the right thing. But it's getting to the point now where it's like, wait a minute, something's not adding up. There's no way you're not doing 50 tests a day. You're hoping to do it. It's like at some point somebody's got to call BS.
And 50 tests a day sufficient? And that's a question that I cannot answer, and I don't think they can answer either because they haven't done enough tests to know if that's sufficient. That comes from epidemiological studies. That comes from data. Otherwise, you're just counting. You're just like, you're guessing. Like, it's just a guess. So look, David, you said you were going to contact the CDC. I actually wanted to offer you 2 names of people you could contact there.
Okay,
because,
I already did, but I will take them.
Okay, so the 2 people that are actually in charge of this program, and they're very good scientists, but I would love to, as a Puerto Rican, to hear their thoughts about why is it that Puerto Rico, like, if it's true that the Department of Health is not allowed by them to share this information with other labs. Okay. It's one of them is Nancy Messonnier, Messonier, and the other one is Anne Schuchat, Schuchat. And I'll text them to you. I have your number. I'll text them to you. But those are 2 people at the CDC that I love to hear from. I think they're very competent scientists, but I like to collate the information they have with the information that the Department of Health is giving regarding why these tests are not more available. I think one of the responsibilities of the Department of Health is to lead, and the governor has an opportunity in that, right? You mentioned that the governor had just led at a national level, at a U.S. level, with this curfew in what you consider the forward-thinking initiative, right? And I also consider it that. So the governor has an opportunity to lead in this regard too, and she should. She should. If the goal here is to protect the people of Puerto Rico, she should be leading by making this test broadly available.
Look, bottom line is, but in all fairness, there's a whole lot of governors in the states who couldn't get Here's what I'm not hearing about. What I'm not hearing is her say, this is not okay, this is unacceptable, we need more tests, and where are they? I haven't heard that. And maybe she said it, but it's like, why aren't they ringing that bell? The governors of New York and Ohio and Washington and Florida, they've all rung that bell of we are woefully undertested. And so that's why, in all fairness, Puerto Rico is not by itself here. They're not out on an island, no pun intended, with a lack of testing.
This is a problem at a federal level, but to put it in contrast, for example, like here in Connecticut, the leadership, or the institutional leadership here at Yale University and the leadership of Connecticut early on realized that this was going to be a failure at a federal level. So they decided they were not going to wait for the federal government and started making their own tests. So Yale made their own test. WashU made their own test. UW made their own test. Johns Hopkins has its own tests. Now, they made that with the help of the state, with the certifications of the state. That is the action that the governor needs to make. Like, all hands on deck. We're gonna get these tests going. Every minute that we wait, we're putting our people in danger. We're asking huge sacrifices from our people, and we're gonna make huge sacrifices to get them the tests that they need to know where we are and where we need to go.
All right, so couple of things that I'm going to follow up on. I want the CDC to give me an answer as to whether they will give the permission, or they may come back and say it's not up to us. They can give them they have what it is. They can give it. All right. So then I circle back and I know the secretary is expecting a follow-up call from me. Number two, I want to know if the governor has expressed a sense of urgency with the test results. I know she's got a lot on her plate. Just managing this curfew is a lot. But like, as you said,
David, without the test,
right,
the curfew is not like this is not like she has a lot on her plate, but this should be priority number one.
Right.
Like this is like
because
this
the tests guide your projections, whether you're closed for 2 weeks or whether you're closed for 4 months.
What are you doing if you don't have the test results? Like let me put it in perspective. Let me just take you. We don't have a lot of tests, but we have some results, and the results that we do have were what led to the curfew. If we had not had those test results, we will not have the curfew. So the only right thing that has been done about this epidemic was based on the test. There's a huge opportunity cost of interventions that will be effective, that will protect the people of Puerto Rico, that are not happening because we don't have this test running right now.
Okay, this is good. You got me fired up. I think you got everybody else fired up, and we need you to be as fired up. Tomorrow, I want to make a call to one of those labs that you and I have talked about in Puerto Rico, and I want to find out if they have asked the government to do some private testing. And I'm also going to reach out to the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, who is a polarizing figure, but this is not about politics. This is about finding out what is she doing.
I don't think. Just get them going.
Right. So the mayor of San Juan, the municipality of San Juan, has greenlit $1 million and signed a contract with Quest Diagnostics for 32, was it 3,300 or 33,000 tests?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but even in that case, Quest is sending them to California.
Correct.
It's great. Look, it takes 24 to 48 hours. It's better than what we're doing right now, but we need something. These tests, I run them in my lab. I'm not a clinical doctor. I cannot run clinical tests in my lab, but I run this type of test in my lab all the time for my own research. It takes 2 to 4 hours. We should be getting results in 2 to 4 hours. They're parallel tests. They should be running hundreds of these tests at a time.
And that's why it matters. And friends, I want to back up and remind everybody, after Hurricane Maria, the government was late. The government didn't get the job done at the local level or the federal level. That's not an opinion. That's a fact based on what we all know. This is another situation where the government is unable to act fast enough. And you have private industry on the island. And God knows I have no dog in this fight. I don't even know who the labs were.
Neither do I.
I asked you to tell me who they were so I could reach out and make calls. But there are private labs on this island who can get the job done. They've been involved in Zika testing in the past and chikungunya and other stuff like that. So how do you get those labs activated so that those tests are happening within what you said 2 to 4 hours and not 2 to 4 days? 2 to 4 days is better than what they have now, but they should be doing it on the island.
Yeah.
I'm all fired up. Okay. I think people have really appreciated this science lesson from you and the motivation that we got from it. So thank you.
Gracias, David. Muchas gracias.
Really appreciate it. We'll talk tomorrow
Later.
or later tonight. All right. Bye. Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, I wanted you guys to hear from him. I mean, he just, and I hope we made that easy to understand. I didn't want to get too in the weeds and confuse everybody, but he loves his island so much, and he's so freaking smart. And